Manor Lords has an achievement called the Merchant. To get this achievement, you need to get a settlement to small town without hunting or collecting berries. 0.6% of the player base currently has this achievement. I've been working on strategies for completing this on restoring the peace mode with default settings. This presents a few issues. The most obvious problem is dealing with hunger in the early game. Without hunting or gathering, this leaves few options for feeding your initial families. You could set up vegetable gardens on your burgage plots, but those take a little too long to start producing. Chicken coops start producing almost immediately, but from my experience, they've been a little too inconsistent to support my settlers in the early game. You could trade for food, but without 2 development points invested in trading, this is going to drain your money real quick. Solution I settled on was beekeeping, but we'll get to that in a bit. The next problem stems from the first. You will spend some time with a hunger penalty, which means slow growth in the early game, which means a smaller militia than you could normally field in the first couple of years. With the default settings, you'll be raided by bandits every 2 years, and they can be brutal for unprepared villages. With a little bit of luck and an understanding of how spearmen work, this problem can be managed fairly easily. We'll be using spearmen militia to take out a few bandit camps so that we can afford a mercenary company for the bandit raid at the beginning of year 3. So here's how I got the achievement. Starting out, I actually shifted my building priorities a little bit. Normally I would start with upgrading my homeless camp and building a storehouse, a granary, a logging camp, and a fire cutter. This time I upgraded my camp, built a logging camp, and immediately started building houses, 5 specifically. I knew the hunger penalty would hit soon, and I wanted to get my first development point and as many new settlers as I could as quickly as possible. Additionally, rather than building 3 vegetable plots, I went with 2 this time and built a second hitching post and ordered a second ox. Thanks Eugene Patey for the feedback on the last video. I'm probably going to do this on every save moving forward. Really solid advice. In hindsight, I probably should have built the storehouse and granary first as normal, because I actually lost some supplies to the weather almost immediately. Manor Lords gonna Manor Lords, I guess. Within a few minutes, I had my first development point. I put this into beekeeping. Unfortunately, the apiary didn't make as dramatic of an impact as it did in my test runs, but I feel like it was still the right move. Let me explain. The apiary starts producing honey almost immediately, continues producing during the winter, and seems to produce more as time goes on. You'll still have to deal with a lack of food, but you'll recover much more quickly than relying on vegetable gardens or eggs alone. With the apiary, I was able to stabilize my approval and get new settlers about 6 months sooner than the test runs where I didn't utilize honey. Not a huge difference in the long run, I suppose, but still worth doing in my opinion. Along with your first development point, the game also gives you 20 spears and large shields. If you're trying to get your militia up and running quickly, this is a pretty viable strategy. Getting your first militia this quickly does mean you'll likely only have 10 to 12 eligible fighters currently, but if you were playing a normal run, you could fill this out very quickly. Anyway, I got a jump on making planks and immediately built my first apiary. You can support 2 per region, and I built my second one not long after the first. I was lucky enough to get 2 families to move in before my approval started to take a hit. With 14 people fit to fight, I mobilized and went after my first bandit camp. This was kind of a risky move, but I wanted to start gathering money as quickly as I could to fund mercenaries later. If you're just going after bandits, spearmen are excellent units. Hildy and his mercenaries and massive retinues are a different conversation, but we're going to completely ignore him on this run. Spearmen militia have 10 points in the impalement stat, which, to my understanding, and which could be wrong, so grain of salt and all that, means that they have a high defense and attack bonus against charging enemies. Bandits will just run right into you at a full sprint, so this is great for us. I also keep my spearmen in the whole ground stance, but I don't know if this actually makes them any more effective or not. So we're at a disadvantage numbers-wise. We're going to look for high ground and hold it. We'll let the bandits run into our spears and secure a decisive victory with no losses. I'd like to send this money to my village, but we need merc money, and we're going to deal with the village's lack of wealth very soon anyway, thanks to our early start on plank production. The trading post is going to be a fairly important part of our strategy. We have a lot of planks and excess firewood we aren't going to be using, and regional wealth can be funneled into chicken coops and goat sheds, as well as getting us access to other goods we don't want to produce ourselves. As our first winter approaches, things are looking pretty bleak, I'm not going to lie, but we're on the right path. Food production is slowly coming up to speed, and our approval is rising, albeit very slowly. With money trickling in, we build our first chicken coop. It's not much, but every little bit helps, I guess. I expand my residential area and start zoning more burgage plots. Once my approval hits 50%, I want to start expanding, and quickly. We need goat sheds now to produce hides for the tannery so we can start supplying the market with clothing. Here's the really cool thing about chicken coops and goat sheds. You don't actually need people living in the associated plot for them to produce their respective goods. We don't have people living in these houses yet, but we're still getting the hides from the attached goat sheds. Very cool. While we wait for houses to get built, we send our militia out to take on another bandit camp, our third now. We crush the bandits and we take our hard-earned money for the treasury. We're in pretty good shape to hire mercenaries now, so the raid coming next year shouldn't really be a concern. At this point, our food production is starting to take off. Our vegetables are coming in nicely, and the eggs and honey are supplementing that supply. I'm still not 100% sure how the apiaries work. On a test run I did on stream, the apiaries were exploding with honey after the first year, but on this run there's hardly anything. I wonder if there's some kind of hidden stat in each region that affects how much the apiary can produce. Maybe I'll do some testing and cover that in the next video. Now that our food supply is stabilized and our approval is approaching 50%, I start building my church. This should be the last requirement I need to meet to start upgrading burgage plots to level 2. While the church is being built, I send the militia out to take on another camp. Hildy beats us to the fight while we get into a favorable position, but we secure the camp and its ill-gotten gains while he's busy fighting. Our approval is up and we're getting new settlers again. Time to build new burgage plots and expand aggressively. Getting level 2 plots is pretty simple, and we start upgrading plots where we can. Level 3 plots, on the other hand, can be a bit of a pain. We need regional wealth. Check. We need a second source of clothing. Not a problem. We have plenty of leather to make shoes. And we need a tavern. Luckily, the game blessed us with good RNG, and we have a suitable spot to grow barley. If you weren't so lucky, importing is an option, but I'd hold off until you have both of the trade perks so you don't bankrupt yourself trying to keep your peasants drunk. Speaking of which, we get our next development point just ahead of the bandit raid, and we snag trade logistics. I'm planning to import gear for my militia rather than producing it, and this will help with the cost of trade routes. I get distracted, forget that the bandits are going to raid me in less than a month, and start zoning farms. I want 3 single Morgan plots to grow barley. These will be grown in offset rotations so that at all times, one farm is growing barley while the other 2 fallow. I remembered that I was supposed to be doing something important and check out the available mercenary companies. We get lucky, and there's a fantastic group with no archers. They're pricey, but if we get unlucky with what the raid throws at us, I want overwhelming forces. In a pinch, our militia can supplement the mercs. Our hired blades spawn in close by, and we get them into position. Bandits come shortly after, and we crush them. My biggest concern for the run is dealt with, at least for a couple more years. I send the mercenaries off after a nearby bandit camp to make up for their high recruitment fee, and then send them on their way. Back home, we staff our newly built farmhouse, and start work on the last major hurdle of this run: booze. While our farmhands work, we expand the residential area again and grab our next development point. We grab the better deals perk and start importing spears and large shields. We don't end up needing our militia again, but it's a good safety net all the same. We start upgrading to level 2 houses and prepare for the final push to level 3 houses. We also start work on our clay industry so that we can upgrade our church and level 2 houses. We're doing a lot of building, So we go ahead and upgrade our 2 hitching posts into stables so we can get a couple more oxen. Our first harvest of barley is coming in, so we build a malt house as well and a brewery to turn the malt into ale. Finally, we build a tavern. All the pieces are in place. Now we just need to wait for 3 houses to have all the requirements met and for us to have the regional wealth to start the upgrades. Eventually, the logistical stars align and we get our level 3 burgages built, completing the challenge and getting us a fancy, rare achievement. Hopefully this helps if you're trying to get this achievement too. Now that I think about it, you could probably just start a second village in another region and then just trade food and goods from your main town to make the whole thing a lot easier. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope this helps. If you're enjoying this content, come check out the stream. I've been playing a bunch of Manor Lords lately, and don't really have any plans to stop anytime soon. I'm having a lot of fun with it. Yeah, thanks again. Have a good one.